Hello and welcome to the Developer Insight Series presentation for new apartments. My name is Kirstin Hodgson. I'm a market research manager at REA, and I conducted this research with the developer team and also our research agency late last year, and I'm looking forward to taking you through it today. So thank you for giving up your time to listen to me talk for about an hour. I promise I'm going to try and keep it as interesting as possible. So as I mentioned today, I'm going to take you through the new home buyers research slides for new apartments that feeds into the huge developer insight series, which we shared late last year. But I'm going to have a specific focus on Queensland today. So there's so much data available from this research. So in the interest of time, I'm only going to take you through the key insights. These are understanding the new apartment buyer journey, how new apartment buyers are choosing the property they want to buy, financing the property, the role of displays and developer events throughout the buying journey, property preferences and the impact of COVID, buyer information needs and communication preferences, and we're going to have a look at this both pre and post sale as well. And then finally, developer brand awareness and consideration. The full deck for this is actually 122 slides long. Don't worry, I'm not going to take you through that today, but I just wanted to highlight that, just to kind of say that there is so much more goodness in the other slides that I'm not going to take you through today. So once you finish watching this session, if you have any questions or need any additional data cuts, please reach out to your account partner, and then they can either reach out to me, the market research team, or they can share the full deck with you as well. Most of this data in the pack is from the 2021 Developer Insight Series. So this is actually based on a survey of 1,000 people considering purchasing or who had purchased a new apartment. To add some extra color to the findings, we also included some on-site behavior analysis, which we conducted alongside the research as well. The survey includes coverage of the key segments relevant to the new apartments market, which includes first home buyers, upsizers, downsizers, and investors. Throughout the pack, you will notice that the data is reported at the total level, so the Australia-wide level, and with differences by segment and state called out if they're significantly different. But as I just mentioned, today our main focus will be on Queensland, so I've added some extra cuts to the slides for this session, even if they aren't significantly different, and I'll be really clear about that as I'm calling them out. The research was conducted with our agency Honeycomb Strategy in August last year. So please be mindful of this when I'm taking you through the results, because obviously a few months have passed since then, but this is still very valuable insight, and we feel that it wouldn't have really changed since then anyway. Honeycomb also conducted the 2019 and 2020 research, which I referenced throughout this pack as well. Before I get into the detail, I thought it would be a good idea to start by showing you a little bit about the landscape of new home buyers. You can see here that the profile of buyers from the Australia-wide survey based on those who are considering purchasing. You can see in the top left that 88% are considering buying an apartment to occupy, while in the top right, 84% are considering buying an apartment as an investor. Interestingly, that big red circle in the middle there, 72% are considering buying an apartment as an investor as well as to occupy. If we have a look at the second line on the tree diagram there, we can see that the new apartment buyer market is dominated by first timers. So we're seeing that 56% of own occupiers are first home buyers, and this is consistent with those who are first time investors as well at 59%. And we feel that this somewhat reflects the apartment as being an entry-level property, with first-home buyers often talking about buying their first home as an apartment to hold on to later as an investment. And the final level of the tree diagram here shows that a small proportion of upsizers and downsizers are also considering new apartments. When we break down this information by state, we can see that the segment sizes are also pretty consistent statistically. Queensland and South Australia both have a higher proportion of downsizers and a lower proportion of upsizers compared to the other states, and that's depicted by the green and the red arrows that you can see on the slide there. So let's get into it. Starting at the very start, why buyers are purchasing new apartments. So the big circles on the slide here, just basically highlighting that owner-occupiers are primarily driven to buy property for financial reasons. So thinking here about a financial investment for the future, current market conditions, and government schemes. However, life moments, thinking about starting and growing a family, and cultural factors, so that Australian dream of owning a home, are also playing a strong role in their decision. If we have a look at the smaller percentages underneath the big circles, they're the percentages for investors, so reasons why investors are looking to buy a property. And we can see here that they're not surprisingly more motivated than owner-occupiers by financial reasons. But it shouldn't be discounted that those same life moments and cultural factors that we are seeing for owner-occupiers are also playing a role in their decision to purchase property. So everything we're seeing on this slide actually mirrors what we saw in the previous research, although this year buyers appear to be even more motivated to buy for financial reasons, which I feel isn't really surprising given that lower than ever interest rates, relaxed lending criteria, and the increase in government stimulus as well, compared to last time we conducted the research in 2019 and 2020. So the call outs here that I'm about to take you through aren't on this slide, but they are in the slide in the full deck, and they're just some differences by buyer segment. So we're seeing that first home buyers are much more likely than other buyer types to want to purchase due to wanting to own the property they live in, starting or growing a family, or moving out of home. However, government incentives are also playing a strong role in their decision compared to other buyer types. And this isn't really a surprising finding, given that most of these government incentives are purposely for first-time buyers. Older buyers, so those aged 55 plus, are more likely to cite reasons cite family reasons, such as downsizing and retirement as their reasons for buying property. Now, focusing on investors specifically, the reasons they've decided to invest in property as opposed to other options, for example, the share market, have not changed significantly year on year. The reasons continue to be related to the longer term outlook, comfort in property as an investment option, and also income generation. We also reintroduced a question back into the research this year that actually looked at how investors were finding their investment opportunities. And we found that they can be quite independent in doing so. So we saw that 2/3 find opportunities via their own online search. Just under half find them through their personal networks, so through their friends, their family, and their colleagues. And 1/3 source opportunities through professionals such as their accountant or financial planner. When we compared the results to the last time we asked this question, way back in 2018, we found that this independence is actually a growing trend. This year, investors are more likely to look for opportunities themselves and reach out to their friends and family, and they're less likely to turn to professionals such as their accountant and financial planners. So we've just had a look at why buyers are purchasing new apartments. And now we're going to have a look at the property journey itself, which looks a little bit different to last time. So for those who have been through the journey in the past 12 months, we're seeing that the journey is significantly shorter. So if you have a look at the red arrow on the slide, we're actually seeing a journey length of 8 months versus the 18 months that we saw back in 2019 and 2020, which is depicted by the grey arrow. This reduction in journey length is apparent across all states, including Queensland. And we're also seeing this drop across all buyer segments. So your first home buyers, your subsequent buyers, and your investors. So it's not one particular group driving this change, it's across the board. What's particularly interesting to kind of point out here, and that's highlighted by the dotted square there, rectangle even, is that buyers spent much less time in the earlier stages of the journey this time. So the investigation and the exploration stages, which was suggesting to us that buyers were more certain about wanting to buy, or they felt more pressure to make a move. And when we first saw the results, we were actually quite surprised, but once we started digging, it made complete sense. So we believe that there are 3 main things at the time of the research that could have made the buying journey shorter. So the first one was market conditions. So we're seeing lower than ever interest rates, government stimulus, and competitive offers, all of which we believe have prompted buyers to go about from thinking about buying to actually starting the process. And I think the fact that these conditions won't be around forever adds to the speed that we're seeing people move through the journey. Secondly, buyers being ready to transact. So the market has been stop-start in some areas, building frustration and readiness. This, coupled with higher budgets due to reduced spend in other areas, and obviously spending more time at home the last couple of years, has contributed to an increased readiness to transact and also to do so at a higher price. And we'll touch more on that higher price a little bit later. And then finally, there's FOMO, so fear of missing out. So we did some extra analysis to really help us understand this. And we looked at the number of listings and inquiries from when we last conducted the research. And what we essentially saw was that we're seeing less properties for sale and more buyers wanting to buy. So less listings available and more buyer inquiries. And we really feel that there's nothing like wanting something that everybody else wants to force you to make a decision quicker. So we've just seen that the buyer journey is much shorter than previously. So now we're going to have a look at how buyers are feeling as they go through this shorter journey. We know from the research from last year that emotions are high throughout the buying journey and that buying property is seen as fundamentally positive, but there's actually lots of negativity dotted throughout the process. And this negativity is driven by things like financial and market uncertainty, quality of the home they are buying, lack of confidence in their own decision making, and also a pretty complex process as well. Throw 18 months of COVID at the time of the research and a hot market into the mix, and we're seeing buyers say that they have even more concerns, which isn't really surprising at all. So buyers are saying that they're concerned about the potential impact of overinflated property prices. They're concerned about more competition for properties, and they're concerned about delays to build timelines. So you can imagine all of these are going to add further stress to the decision-making process, and a process that buyers already had quite a lot of negativity dotted throughout. So here I think it's really important to kind of think about what we can do to alleviate some of this. So it's important to provide clear, proactive communication around all of these areas on the slide to help tackle concerns up front and guide the buyer through the journey and help them understand the current landscape and assess their options. When we had a look at this for Queensland specifically, we saw that buyers in Queensland, despite the lesser impact of COVID at the time of the research, still had the same top three concerns in that order. But it's also worth calling out that buyers in Queensland were significantly less likely than buyers in other states to say that they were concerned about whether developments would be completed. And that's highlighted on the slide there as well. So the final thing we're going to have a look at in terms of the journey today is the types of property that buyers are looking for. Yes, this research is about apartment buyers, and ultimately they have bought or they're considering an apartment. However, this chart shows the consideration of property types at each stage of the journey. And it's interesting to see that most new apartment buyers start their journey with broad considerations and are actually considering other new builds as well as established properties as well. This interest in other options, such as established properties, new standalone houses and townhouses, drops off once buyers start refining their search and get to the later stages of their journey. I think what's particularly interesting to call out here is that compared to the last time we conducted the research in 2019-2020, we actually saw significantly more apartment buyers exploring house and land options during their journey. And we really felt that this could be driven by two things. So one is the impact of COVID and wanting more space, which we will touch on again later. And the second thing is the impact of stimulus at play, so the Home Builder Grant. The final thing that I just wanted to call out in relation to this slide is that this data should be reviewed with some caution. So we don't ask specifically what properties are being considered at each stage of the journey. As you can imagine, that would be pretty tedious for people completing the survey. So instead, to get a view on this, we've actually cut one question with another to get an understanding of which properties buyers are considering at each stage of the journey. So how are apartment buyers choosing the apartment they want to buy? In the previous research, we really explored the concept of quality. And in this research, we found that although 2/3 of buyers, so 64%, said that they were worried about the quality of new apartments in Australia, it was also the main reason why they chose to buy a new apartment versus an established one. So essentially, buyers saw quality as an issue throughout the entire property market, so in established properties as well. And they felt that the quality assurances in place for buying a new apartment, so thinking here about build warranty, the fact that the apartment is less likely to need repairs and maintenance, high quality, it has high quality finishes, the confidence in the build quality, helped them alleviate their concerns somewhat. When we conducted the research this year, we saw exactly the same thing. So we saw almost exactly the same proportion of buyers, so 65%, say that they were worried about the quality of apartments in Australia. But again, we also saw that quality assurance was the number one reason why they would buy a new apartment over an established one. This quality is followed by features such as modern features, energy efficient features, sustainable features, costs, so the fact that when you're buying a new apartment, you can have stamp duty and tax savings, and then investment benefits. So it's therefore not surprising that we see these factors or benefits of buying new also flow into how buyers are choosing a development. So the number one factor in choosing an apartment development is quality. Buyers continue to want to assess quality themselves through viewing the quality of previous projects, judging the quality of display suites, and accessing customer testimonials as well. This is then followed by the development itself. So thinking here about amenities and inclusions offered, the price, location, investment returns, and also service. So thinking here about communication from the developer and the display suite experience. There are interesting differences by segment as well. So I'm just going to spend some time talking about those. So quality is consistently important across all segments, ages, states. You name it, quality is sitting in the number one spot. However, price of apartments is more important for 55+-year-olds, downsizers, and buyers in WA. Price as a standalone factor is not as important to investors. However, this group is of course more concerned about investor returns. First-time investors and ACT residents are relatively less concerned about location, while service received is slightly more important to subsequent buyers. Finally, when we look specifically at the offers that appeal to buyers, we've got all the individual offers here, and we've also grouped them up into larger groups. You can see that free upgrades or inclusions and price discounts are leading strongly, which is relatively consistent by age, state, and segment. However, there are some differences which I'll call out now. Females are more likely than males to be enticed by a price discount, property or appliance upgrade, and solar packages included in the build price appeal most to South Australian residents. So now let's talk about all things finance. So we added some finance questions from the 2018 research back into the research this year to really understand what had changed over the last few years. And firstly, we're going to chat about how new apartment buyers are financing or planning to finance their purchase. And what we kind of saw was that 2/3 of apartment buyers finance their new apartment with a home loan, just over half used cash or other savings, 1/3 used equity from other assets or investments, and 1/5 finance their purchase through a self-managed super fund. When we compare results by age group, this is where we see the biggest differences. We see that buyers aged under 35 are more likely to finance their property purchase with a home loan, while buyers aged 35 to 54 years are more likely to be leveraging equity from other assets or investments or by accessing a self-managed super fund. These differences are interesting to look at, but really not that surprising, because we know that the majority of buyers aged under 35 years are getting into the market for the first time. They have little or no assets, and they're relying on savings or perhaps a guarantor to get into the market. while older buyers are likely to have a home or equity in the home that they can, or other assets that they can draw on. So now we're quickly going to chat about when in the journey new apartment buyers are securing finance. So 3 in 4 buyers had finance approved before they decided which apartment to buy. This means that 1 in 4, I'm sure you can all do the math, new apartment buyers are making finance decisions after they have found their property. So based on this, it's suggested that the first conversation with buyers should involve a discussion around finances and potentially a recommendation to align with a local broker. We've seen from other research that organising finance is a step in the buying journey that some buyers find particularly tricky. And using a broker can provide buyers with extra support. It gives them more choice and it can help them overcome hurdles that some banks may have in place when it comes to new properties as well. Now let's unpack the display experience. We really bulked out this section this year, and I had grand plans of doing even more research, some ethnography, spending time with buyers, but unfortunately over here in Victoria, we were locked down for quite a while, so I wasn't able to do that. But there's so much more insight on displays in the research this year. Before I get into it, the one thing that I wanted to chat about ahead of this section is just the language that I'm going to use, because I'm going to just use the term displays, because as we saw earlier, new apartment buyers keep their options open throughout their journey, and they consider many different property types, particularly at the start of their journey. And as a result, they visit multiple displays and their experience is varied as well. So when I say displays, I'm referencing the display experience as a whole, although in this section, there are obviously some findings relating specifically to apartment developer display suites as well. So we can see on this slide that 82% of apartment buyers visited some type of display throughout their journey, and 49% attended a developer event. So the display is in the red on the left-hand side, and it's rolled up to 82% there, and then event attendance is on the right-hand side in the purple. So when we break this down even further, we can see that 48% of buyers visited an apartment developer display suite specifically. However, as I just mentioned, many apartment buyers are also considering other housing options. So we actually saw roughly the same proportion of buyers visit a land developer display centre and a home builder display centre as well, so 47 and 44% respectively. 37% of buyers said that they attended a developer launch event and 27% a VIP buyer event. It's also worth noting here that apartment buyers are significantly more engaged with the display experience than house and land buyers. So in comparison, just 67% of house and land buyers visited a display of some sort, and 17% visited an event. Looking at visitation of apartment developer display suites specifically, despite visitation this year being only slightly lower than 2020, so it's 51% in 2020 and it's 48% this year, we're actually seeing that it's trending significantly lower than 2018, and it's trending downwards over time. I just want to point out as well that that 2020 figure of 51% is also pre-COVID. It was conducted at the end of 2020. I guess what this is essentially saying to us is that we're seeing more apartment buyers than ever go on to buy an apartment without actually stepping foot in a display suite, which is really interesting and something that needs to be considered going forward. We know that some developments may not have a display, which may be driving this result somewhat, but I think the focus should be on buyers who are not visiting a display, even when there is one available, and just thinking here about how we can ensure buyers are getting what they need to make a decision. So when in their journey are buyers visiting displays? The research found that displays play the biggest role earlier in the buying journey when buyers are investigating buying and exploring and prioritizing their search criteria for the property that they want to buy. And this is why we're seeing multiple types of display visited at this time. We then see that visitation then declines as the journey progresses, Although it's interesting to see that almost 1 in 5, so right at the end of the arrow there, 17%, are visiting displays in the final stage of their journey, which is likely when they're finalizing things such as their fixtures and fittings. But we also feel that excitement may be playing a role here too. There are no differences in the journey stage visitation by age, gender, state, or by a segment either. When it comes to finding displays they plan to visit during their journey, buyers are essentially going online to find them. So we're seeing here that 32% go onto social media, 26% conduct a Google search, and 25% use realestate.com.au. I thought what was quite interesting here, because we usually see differences by buyer segment and age, there was actually no differences here by segment either in terms of how they found displays. So the main reasons for visiting apartment developer display suites. So seeing the size of the property and the rooms is the main reason for visiting these types of displays, as well as to get a feel for the property. When we have a look at these reasons by age, we can see here that buyers aged 55 plus appear to be utilizing the apartment display suites more than any other age group, with this age group more likely to be visiting to compare different apartment designs, see fittings and finishes, talk with a salesperson, view inclusions and extras, and obtain brochures as well. Finally, for the minority of buyers who didn't visit any display along their journey, so this is at 18%, so we saw at the start that 82% said that they visited some type of display, so we're seeing that 18% visited no display at all. We actually saw that COVID restriction was the main barrier, which I don't think is surprising. However, outside of this, some buyers felt that they didn't need to visit because they were able to find the information they needed elsewhere, and because they prefer to look at developments online rather than going to a display in person. Looking at Queensland specifically, bay sizes are pretty small, but it's always good to have a look. COVID did play a role in why buyers chose not to visit, so it was the #1 reason. But buyers in Queensland were more likely to say that they felt they didn't get any value from visiting a display. For those buyers not visiting a display, it's important to continue to think about the buying and nurturing journey and ensure that information that they may need is easily available elsewhere to help them make a purchase decision. So what are new apartment buyers looking for, and how has this changed as a result of COVID? First, we'll look at what buyers are looking for. When it comes to preferred apartment locations, buyers are still continuing to prioritise suburban or CBD living. So we can see here that 70% of buyers are considering the middle or outer suburbs. That was 69% in 2020, and 63% are considering a CBD location. So whether that's in the CBD itself or on the CBD fringe, and that was 62% in 2020. We're seeing the same preferences in Queensland, with 69% of buyers considering middle or outer suburbs and 65% considering buying in the CBD or the CBD fringe. Looking now at how far buyers are planning to buy from their current home, the majority are looking to stay within a 20-kilometre radius, with the average being 24 kilometres. For Queensland, the average radius is slightly wider at 28%. So 28 kilometres. Looking at specific areas within Queensland, residents south of Brisbane were willing to search further afield than their inner city and northeast counterparts. So on average, new apartment buyers have a budget of $873,000, which is significantly larger average than we saw in 2020 at $684,000. If you have a look over on the left-hand side, we can see that budget varies by buyer type, with subsequent buyers having significantly more to play with than first home buyers, while the average investor has a budget of around $920,000 to spend on a new apartment. In terms of state, we're seeing that buyers in South Australia, WA, and Queensland have the lowest budget to spend on apartments as well. But obviously we know that that is very related to the price of properties in these states. When we're looking at why the budget could have increased so much year on year, we really felt that there are a few things, and we've touched on some of them earlier, but as kind of part of this presentation, we reached out to our economists to see if what they were seeing in the market was similar to what we were seeing in this piece of research. And it was pretty aligned. And the reasons were that they gave us were lower interest rates. So all else equal, a drop in interest rates just means that borrowers can afford to service a higher level of debt. And this has been the primary driver of property prices since March 2020. The second thing was higher household savings. So between December 2019 and June 2020, we actually saw the household savings ratio quadruple. And while it's trended slightly down since, it still remains well above pre-COVID levels. And then finally, many of those who already owned property prior to 2020 have seen their assets significantly rise in value. And this has boosted the budgets of those who have sold a property and then gone on to rebuy. And then for investors, the usable equity in their existing properties has likely increased, which in turn has increased their buying power when it comes to purchasing additional investments. When it comes to property layout, we're seeing that preferences haven't changed significantly since 2020. And the average apartment buyer is looking for 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and 2 car spaces, with similar preferences for both owner-occupier and investors as well. Preferences are broadly similar by state, although we are seeing on this slide that buyers in WA are most likely to be looking for an apartment with 3 or more bedrooms. We added an old question into the research this year, which looked at which apartment amenities buyers would be willing to pay more for. So just in the interest of time, when I take you through the next couple of slides, I'm going to talk about desired apartment amenities, and I'm also just going to call out the percentages from the new question, amenities willing to pay more for. So when it comes to the most appealing apartment amenities, a car parking space is the most desired, especially for those buyers aged 55 plus and those living in Queensland or South Australia. However, for many, there's the expectation that a parking space would be included within the price that they paid for the apartment, with only half, you can see on the slide there, 54%, prepared to pay more for this feature. Storage is the second most appealing feature, with 48% of buyers finding it appealing, especially those aged 55 plus years. And again, there appears to be expectation that storage would be included in the purchase price, with just 42% saying they would be willing to pay more for this feature. I think it's worth mentioning here as well that storage also sat within the top 3 last year. So it might not seem like a huge thing, but it's something that buyers are really wanting in their apartments. Looking at apartment amenities by buyer segment, we found that first-time buyers and investors are more willing to make compromises. So they're significantly less likely to desire popular apartment amenities like a car parking space or integrated air conditioning. And given that they won't be living in the property, the appeal of things like soundproofing tech and an upgraded kitchen appliances is more likely to be lost on new apartment investors. Also, when we have a look at this by buyer gender, we actually find that female buyers are significantly more likely than male buyers to place greater importance on a number of apartment features when looking for the right property. So features such as a car parking space, integrated air conditioning, soundproofing, and home automation technology are all more appealing to females, as well as upgraded kitchen appliances and work surfaces. Now, looking at the features willing to pay more for question on its own, the features that most apartment buyers would be willing to pay more for are upgraded floor coverings, a car parking space, which we saw earlier, and home automation tech. If we look at the bottom of this chart, there's less desire to pay more for storage or built-in cabinetry, which suggests that buyers may expect both of these things to be included in the purchase price. And there were no differences by buyer segment either. Now, thinking more broadly about the apartment development, security continues to be of the highest priority. Many buyers are also motivated by the inclusion of green features around the development, such as the use of solar power, green common areas, or even a communal garden. We're seeing on this slide that around 2 in 5 will be looking for fitness areas such as a gym, pool, or steam room. And females are more likely than males to find security features, fitness areas, and outdoor living and entertaining spaces, and also pet-friendly complexes more appealing. It's also worth noting as well that development features haven't changed significantly year on year. So we are still seeing security sit at the top of the list. But what we are seeing is that the desire for an on-site gym or pool has actually dropped slightly, and it's been replaced by green features in second place. Outdoor spaces and pet-friendly complexes are the same year on year. So this slide looks at behavioural data on site and highlights the typical keywords that are entered when searching specifically for new apartments. So while the use of keyword search terms isn't actually common, so only 17% of searches use the keyword search function, it gives us an indication of what's important to buyers outside of what they told us on the previous slide. So on the previous slides, we had a question within the survey and they had a list to choose from. This is buyers going on to realestate.com.au and searching for properties and typing in what's important to them. And we've coded that up and had a look at that here. And what the slide is essentially showing us is that a garage, swimming pool, and a balcony are the most sought after features across most states. Last year, we saw that it was air conditioning, a balcony, balcony or outdoor area, and en suites. When we have a look at differences by state, aircon is searched more for in New South Wales, Queensland, and WA. Swimming pools were more common in WA and Queensland, whereas for us in Victoria and South Australia, it's heating. And I think what's really interesting as well is, despite seeing how highly gyms are valued on the previous slide, they're actually not mentioned at all here. So people weren't putting it in for keyword search. So how has COVID impacted what buyers are looking for? So 3 in 4 new apartment buyers made a change to their homes during COVID-19. And 70% of these changed a room in some way. So whether this was hybridizing a space or repurposing a room completely, we found that these changes were mostly made to accommodate working and studying from home. The findings in this research echo what we saw in the property seeker study at the end of 2020. So that's another huge piece of research that we conduct in the market research team at REA. And in that study, we found that the same proportion of Australians had made changes to their home or life during COVID-19, and half of them would still like their home to have different features. So there's a lot of information on this slide, but essentially it's showing of those who made a change to their home, what percentage expect the change they made to be permanent in the grey, and what expect the change they made to be temporary by change made. And we wanted to ask this question because I think it's really interesting looking at changes that people have made to their homes, but we really wanted to understand what was sticking and what we would need to think about going forward. I guess on this slide, what I wanted to call out here was that 58% of those who adapted a room in some way expected the changes that they made to be permanent. So that is, they expect to be using their bedrooms, their living spaces, their garages as multi-use spaces for the foreseeable future. And I think this is something that you're going to have to think about longer term when it comes to designing apartments. Greg Braun from my team and some special guests really unpacked this in the COVID-19 and property preferences webinar at the end of the Developer Insight series rollout in December, which is definitely worth a watch if you haven't seen it already. Final thing here, so with more time spent at home during the past couple of years now, many new apartment buyers are also playing greater importance on living spaces when considering new properties. And as a result, they are looking for more space, so both indoor and outdoor space, and also features that promote comfort and wellness. When we have a look at the features individually highlighted by the red bars there, we can see that an apartment with a home office or a study nook tops the list for buyers in a post-COVID world. And this is followed by natural light, a secured car park, a balcony, and air conditioning as well. And this again is in line with Property Seeker, where we also found the top 5 desired features post-COVID also focused on the idea of space and wellness. So that was more natural light, more living spaces, larger outdoor spaces, more bedrooms, and a home office space. So finally, we added a question into this research to try and understand if apartment living had become more or less appealing due to COVID, because we felt that obviously we were seeing all these things with regards to space and being stuck in an apartment, like stuck in your homes for a really long time. And we just wanted to see how buyers were feeling about it. And we actually found that that it hasn't really, COVID hasn't really impacted the appeal of apartment living for most. So you can see there on the chart, 57% actually said that they would find apartment living more appealing. And we're seeing this is particularly higher for those in Tasmania and WA. Let's look at the bottom of the chart. We found that just 1 in 10 find apartment living less appealing than a year ago, with the main reasons being the limited space and the challenge of living in apartments during lockdown. However, for the 1 in 2 that find apartment living more appealing than a year ago, we can see some verbatims on the right-hand side there. It's just due to affordability, apartments needing less maintenance than living in a house, or a sense of community and security as well. Not long to go. The final slides relate to buyer information needs and communication preferences, both pre and post-purchase. We've shared insights regarding pre-purchase communications in previous insight series, but this is actually the first time that we've looked into post-purchase communications. Before we get into the type of information that buyers are wanting from you, we're just going to have a look at how they're researching themselves and the type of information that they're looking for. So we can see here that the vast majority of apartment buyers prefer to do research first before talking to professionals. And this is in line with 2020, where the same proportion said the same. When we have a look at this by age, we're seeing that under 35-year-old buyers are more likely to say this than other groups. So they're more likely to say that they prefer to do their research first. And we know that these younger buyers are likely to be new to the process and are more likely to lean on professionals and friends and family for advice. New apartment buyers continue to overwhelmingly use online to research. This is followed by contacting real estate agents directly and word of mouth from friends or family. Focusing specifically on those online research sources, we can clearly see that realestate.com.au dominates, followed by Domain and Google search engines as well. As I just mentioned, under 35-year-olds, first homeowner occupiers and also first-time investors are more likely to turn to their friends and family in order to get trusted advice from those who have been through the journey before. Well, we're also seeing that social media has greater influence amongst younger buyers than older buyers. So when it comes to information most interested in, or information that buyers are looking for themselves as they do this huge piece of research, we're seeing that they're most interested in property data and sales information, followed by financial and mortgage information and government grants and schemes. We also saw some interesting cuts by segment, which are discussed on the following slides. First-time buyers are more likely than other buyer segments to be looking for support about the purchase journey and things to watch out for. And unsurprisingly, investors are more likely to be looking for information about rental demand and renter profiles in specific areas. Information about the neighbourhood or the local suburb is more valuable to buyers earlier in the journey. So this is looking at all the information that they're looking for by journey stage. For buyers looking to rent out their property, rental demand and renter profile information is most useful at acceptance. So we've just had a look at the type of information buyers are looking for during their journey. The following 3 slides look at the types of content each buyer type, so first home buyers, subsequent home buyers and investors are engaging with on realestate.com.au. First home buyers are mostly looking at how-to guides and guidance on what to buy. So they're needing that hand-holding as they're going through the process. And you can see an example of some of the most commonly viewed articles on the right-hand side there. And you can see that they're actually very informative articles. Subsequent buyers are also utilizing how-to guides, but for different reasons. So this is most likely because many are selling a property for the first time, or processes may have changed since they sold their last property 15 or 20 years ago. An example of the articles that they're having a look at is are also on the right-hand side. And finally, investors are more likely than other buyers to engage with investor-related content, and I don't think there's any surprise there. They are also looking at how-to guides, but the how-to guides that they're looking at are more specific to investing compared to other buyers. So final few slides, we're just going to have a quick look at pre-purchase communications. So we've just seen that buyers are looking for lots of information independently. However, when it comes to information from you specifically, their needs are broad and buyers are wanting you to provide lots of different things. So the top things coming out here are property information, so property inclusions, designs and floor plans, impact of COVID on the development, local area information, so thinking here about things like council approval rates and information on local amenities, market insights, including rent appraisals specifically for those investors, and tips and advice as well. As buyers progress through the journey, information needs differ slightly. So we're seeing that tips and advice and market insights are most useful earlier in the buying journey when buyers are still in the investigation and exploration stages. When it comes to delivering information to buyers, we're still seeing that email remains the most popular channel for the delivery of this information, especially for information about council approval rates, market investor insights, or new home designs. However, we're also seeing that other channels play a role too, particularly when it comes to different types of information. So if you're considering content for social media channels, tips and how-to guides on property design and styling is most likely to resonate with new apartment buyers. Text, on the other hand, is especially suited to a limited time special offer and information about similar projects and properties. When it comes to how often buyers want to hear from you, it's fairly frequently. So 3 and 4 want communications once a fortnight more frequently. And this is pretty consistent across buyer segments and other demographics as well. As I mentioned, this year we also wanted to explore post-purchase communications between developers and buyers. And pleasingly, we found that the vast majority of apartment buyers, so 87%, told us that they heard from their developer after the settlement process. And for some, this was actually on multiple occasions. And it's just worth pointing out here as well that compared to house and land buyers, apartment buyers were significantly more likely to have heard from their developer, which is great. And what we're seeing as a result of this post-purchase communication is that the majority of buyers are satisfied with the level of communication that they receive, regardless of whether this is once or multiple times. And finally, when it comes to information requirements post-settlement, it's all about, we touched on quality earlier, and we've really seen that kind of the top 2 things that are coming out here are based on quality. So they're looking for information about repair warranties and build warranties. And they're also looking for information on body corp fees as well. When we have a look at this by buyer segment, we're actually seeing that older buyers, age 55 plus, are most likely to feel that they didn't need any additional information post-purchase. When I present this, I always have a little chuckle because I do, as if you remember, we saw on the apartment developer display suite slide that 55 plus buyers were more likely to go into an apartment developer display suite to get all the information there. So I really feel that by the time they've got to the post-purchase stage, they already have all the information they need. That's why they're more likely to say this. And there are actually no other differences by segment or state either. So finally, in the following slides, we asked from a prompted list the apartment developer brands that buyers were aware of. Buyers from each state were asked from a list that was specific to the state they were in. So today I'll be sharing the Queensland slide. And those who are aware of the brand were then asked if they would consider that developer brand. So I'll just give you a second to have a look at this while I take a sip of the drink, and then I will, summarize and finalize this presentation today. As I mentioned, all of these slides will be available as well, so you'll be able to look at this after the session. So I'm very, very conscious that I've just shared a lot of information with you today, and I've been talking for a while. So I thought it would be really good to kind of end with a quick summary of what I believe to be the 7 things that you should take away from the pack that I've shared today. So the first is that the new apartment buyer journey shortened due to buyer readiness, market conditions, and FOMO. Quality issues are considered to be across the housing market, and as a result, quality assurance continues to be the #1 reason why buyers are considering new apartments versus established ones. Quality is also the most important factor when choosing an apartment developer. We're seeing that buyers prefer to evaluate the quality of developments themselves by assessing the quality of previous projects, the quality, look and feel of displays, and also by viewing customer testimonials. Displays remain a big part of the new home buying journey. However, we're also seeing that more buyers than ever are buying an apartment without setting foot in one. And this really needs to be considered when showcasing developments to ensure those who are choosing not to visit are getting what they need. Budgets for new apartments have increased, driven by low interest rates, higher household savings, and asset value increases. But as we saw, so have buyer needs and wants for a property as well. Almost 6 in 10 buyers who made changes to their homes or lifestyles during COVID expect the changes to stick around. So what does this mean for the design of new apartments going forward? And finally, the post-purchase communications experience is currently working for new apartment buyers, with the majority hearing from their developer post-settlement, and satisfaction with the communication received is also high. So thank you. That is all from me. Thank you again for your time today. And now I'm going to hand over for some Q&A. Thank you.